Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Cluster API provider Azure CAPZ office hours. It's Thursday, February 2nd. We are meeting on behalf of CNCF SIG cluster lifecycle and abide by the code of conduct. So please be kind to one another. We ask that you use the raise hand feature in Zoom if you'd like to speak, and we welcome all speakers. At the beginning of every meeting, we want to take a moment to allow folks to introduce themselves if you're new or if you want to say hi for any other reason. So I'll go ahead and shut up, turn my mic off, and see if anybody wants to take advantage of that.
Hey, I'm Thibaut Ansberger. I work for Walmart, and we'll be joining this meeting from time to time.
Welcome, Thibaut. Hello again. Seen you in a couple meetings. Great to have you as a familiar face in Cluster API land.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we are ready to start the regular agenda here. So please, can everybody can see the Google Doc on screen, today's session? Cool. So if you get a chance and you're inclined, please add yourself to the attendee list here. So at the beginning, we will go through these open discussion items that have been added by folks. Is David Teaser, are you here yet? If not, we will pass you over. I don't see David. And then at the end, we'll do a milestone review of 1.8. So I guess I'm the only one besides David who has an agenda item. I wanted to talk about end-to-end test flakes. I am getting ready to go on paternity leave any moment, which will take me away from this exciting area for a couple weeks initially. And so in leading up to that, I've decided, I hope sensibly, not to work on anything big, but I did manage to get observe a bunch of test flakes, and that's something that will actually pay off as I'm gone. Hopefully the gift that keeps giving if we manage to get a little bit better test signal. I feel like last week in particular, we made some progress, but I wanted to check back in because I've been sort of in a very particular space for the last couple of days. Are folks seeing fewer test flakes in PRs in particular? I was especially feeling like starting, say, a month or two ago, PRs are getting more and more difficult to get green signal. I mean, obviously, you don't want to get green signal if there's something broken, but does anyone have any? Go ahead, Matt.
I mean, just speaking at the ones I'm looking at, it got a little better. We still have a lot of flakes, and CI entry point is still failing. But I've been looking at it more particularly because I'm looking at test grid this week. It's gotten better. You definitely helped. I mean, every change you made was good, but it's a whack-a-mole game.
Yeah, we want to keep making that better. So I'm actually working on CI entry point now, and it's super complex because it's used in many different ways across many projects. But hopefully, I have some things that I can hand off that will make that a little bit better. But please feel free to be overly sensitive to test flakes. I know it's super easy. I'm guilty of this myself, to be just cynical and pessimistic and hit retest 4 times and then get green and then just be happy to be done with it. I'm not going to say it's a requirement not to do that, but if you feel like you need to vent, please go in Slack and vent to us and say, what is going on with this test flakes? Please make this better. Because it'll contribute to us sort of fighting against that cynicism. All right, looks like we have a light agenda because I don't see David T. So let's go to
David's here now.
Hi, David T.
Hi. Had some.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
So yeah, no worries. Yeah, I know I signed up first here, but I figure I can go ahead and
you're up.
Cover. Cool. All right. Well, I went ahead and did a PR for the roadmap updates, and so I wanted to just drive awareness to that and drive any feedback amongst the community in case there's anything you think is missing or should be there, or have any concerns about the structure. I'm really changing the sections even for this. We had an extremely outdated roadmap from previously where we had milestones that are already done. So it definitely needs to be overhauled. But one of the things in terms of sections, I wanted to get rid of the actual milestones and just point people to the milestones, because that's more dynamic and will have a longer lifespan. And I don't feel like a real value in putting milestone data into a static doc. So I removed that section. And I added 2 new sections. One is high level vision. I think that we may decide to copy that into other places, or one other place, I don't know, on the overall book, but I thought it's really important to kind of put that there for keeping in mind kind of where we're going and longer term, where the types of things that we want to do with CapZ. There's just 2 sentences here. So we've been a little bit of back and forth with Jack and Cecile on some of the sentences there. So feel free to comment on this. I think in a condensed format here, I think one of the things was I wanted just to illustrate obviously what CapZ is, assuming like people that aren't familiar with what do you use this tool for, as kind of the first sentence on the structure. And then the second one I think is a little longer term type of vision of what larger context does CapZ play a role as the second sentence of the vision. And then epics is the other section I added, and this is obviously a commonly used term in the broader sense of product management, but it isn't really a term that is necessarily a GitHub one specifically. GitHub just uses features. The way I like to look at it is features that are multiple features that roll up to a larger time span. Kind of, I'm just calling it epics. I'm open to other names if you'd like, but these 3 kind of bullets I'd say are some of these things are already in flight, as you see here. And the includes list by no means is an all-inclusive list. There could be other things that get added there, but those are kind of 3 major themes that I think are going now that will last 1.8 and potentially a little bit beyond. But the idea is that we would, check. I think the thing we roughly landed on now is every milestone we kind of have a rough check of do we need to update the epics in the roadmap or not. And I think my personal goal is to say at least once every 6 months at a minimum we have an update to the doc. I think that's a pretty safe thing to say. So yeah, any feedback, comments, concerns, questions? Jack, go ahead.
Is it fair to say that in addition to providing sort of as best as we can canonical information as to what we're working on strategically, so speaking to the epics section, so I think that is a net addition to this doc. So another thing to say is that this doc is going to be, you're going to get to this at the CapZ book and not just browsing through GitHub Markdown in the source hierarchy. So
yeah,
but yeah, in the epics section, so if I'm a user, if I'm potentially like new user just kicking the tires on what's CapZ, having this data allows me to extrapolate forward what the project is sort of focused on building in the next, say, 6 months or whatever. Is that one fair justification for this?
Yeah, and I think it also gives people. I did look at some of the other CAPI providers just curious, but I do think that in general, having something there, that lets people know that we're thinking about this. We have kind of a plan for what we're doing moving forward, as opposed to just kind of randomly doing whatever comes up, the hottest fire. I think helps provide confidence for people in deciding that they want to make a bet on utilizing, CapZ as a production ready thing for their company.
Cool. Yeah, I'll add some notes to the doc in this, but it occurs to me that we probably want to include in this section, or at least somehow signal that because CapZ is a community project, this is also, by publishing these epics, it's a way for us to say, if this is not what you want us to be working on, get involved. Like this is a movable feast, so to speak. Like it's not top down strict. So maybe we could talk on the PR thread about how best to concisely invite folks to influence that. Like everybody in the community has a chance to vote for what this is. You know, the managed cluster in particular is really an outcome of us paying attention to very obvious things in the user community. Folks are wanting to use this, so we're like, yeah, this should be a priority. So we want to make sure that feedback loop is included there.
Yep, absolutely. And I mean, I tried to put some of that language at the top sentence, right? Active community PR contributions are prioritized. You know, milestones and things are rough. You know, join the calls or the office hours, right, where we are here to help discuss, help influence those things. But certainly, I agree, Jack. If open to suggestions, if you don't think that that's clear. But yeah, and again, another reason why we're bringing this up on the call is to provide feedback, ask for input on this roadmap. So
awesome. So again, this is an open PR, it hasn't merged, so add your comments 3116.
Yep.
Any more commentary on that topic? Otherwise we can kick it back to David for the next one. And go ahead, David.
okay. Yeah, the next one is something that was brought up or discussed, I think loosely, but I wanted to formally bring up the idea anyway of having a either a one-off or, you know, obviously it could be a regular thing, but having a kind of pre-release, at least midway through the release cycle. We do releases once every two months for major releases. And I know at least for this release, obviously one of the big things is having the managed cluster experience out of experimental, so you no longer have to put those flags and giving people that confidence in that way. There's obviously always some significant amount of features that we're adding in every milestone. And so the thinking is that if we had a release at, let's say, that month mark, so midway through the cycle, you can call it alpha, you could call it a beta. I would say probably more alpha would be closer because we're probably adding a bunch of things, changing a bunch of things in the middle. But the whole point or the reason why we would do that or consider it is to allow people to kind of have an early kick the tires of whatever is in that milestone before the final release. And the hope is that the value of you know, whatever users might be using that for, and that feedback that we gather from that would be worth the effort on the engineering side to do the actual release. It does take some engineering effort, obviously, to go through the release cycles and the tests and the other things. And so, you know, just bringing this up for consideration if the community thinks that would be valuable or not. Yeah, Mike, go ahead.
I would almost recommend if we had a way to automate it to, you know, sufficiently to just do it nightly. You know, such and such dash nightly, rather than putting cycles into, oh, do we do it at this point? Do we do it at that point? Just do a nightly build if the automation is sufficient to do it automatically every night.
Okay. Yeah, that's an idea. I know a weekly thing as well would be another consideration. I did that when I was managing the notation project. We set up a automated weekly release. But yeah, I don't know. That's definitely something to consider. I think nightly, I don't know, in my opinion, it starts to get into, is that worth it? Even just the the cycles of the infrastructure running, because there's a cost to run all the tests and all the other things, right? Even if you do a release. But yeah, I think it's something we could consider. I don't know. I know that we do have our release process isn't 100% hands off at this point. I'm not sure, you know, how much work it would be to get to that point. But that's something maybe we could discuss to reduce the overhead of the release itself. Obviously, for a major release like formal release, I think there's going to be inherently some more work there, but yeah, something we could think about. Is there a way we could reduce the overhead for an alpha or for a weekly, so it's not as much of a overhead to do the release? Jack, I think you're next, and maybe back to Mike.
I was just going to ask Mike, can you file an issue? I think the first thing we want to do is investigate, because David's right about the fact that the sort of normal release process is not actually fully automated for reasons which are not just us being lazy. It's really hard because we're part of SIG cluster lifecycle, and the canonical images get posted in the sort of standard Kubernetes places, and that requires coordination between various projects, different CI stacks. That's really difficult to automate. But I wonder if we could do we could host images elsewhere. So anyway, if you could file an issue and then we can maybe cost that out, that I think that would be helpful. I would tend to say between nightly and weekly, if we're going to do it, nightly has the value of it encourages folks, I think, to really get involved in the feature and bug fix part of the process, because then you can smoke test stuff in your environment much more quickly. So it actually, in my experience, it can add as an incentive to get involved in a project if I know, oh, if I fix a bug, I know that I can test it in my environment in a couple of days if it gets merged. I think that can be valuable. I'll kick it back to Mike T.
Yeah, I'm not, saying it has to be nightly. I didn't take into account the fact that there's manual steps. Didn't realize how much manual was involved, or take into account the cost aspect of running it that way. I'm fine with weekly as well. It was just the idea of, if we can automate it, it doesn't really matter to me, but I like the idea of just pushing out, as we can in an automated process, that kind of stuff.
Go ahead.
Matt B.
Hey, I was just going to say, I mean, from my point of view, I don't think weekly versus nightly is the hitch. The hitch is what you were hinting at, Jack, which is the publishing process, which is potentially automatable, but in practice, the actual publishing can take more than 24 hours sometimes. Usually it doesn't, but we definitely had times where it can take multiple days. They're all published, and it's at this point totally manual. So I would think if we're going to do nightly or weekly, we might have to change and try and publish to a community gallery or something that's a lot lower overhead, which maybe is a good thing to look at. We don't need to do it. But I really like that idea, Mike. I think it'd be good.
Yeah, I agree that I think based on my understanding of the current release process, a nightly release would have to be a much less official, would go through much less official channels in terms of CNCF. So we'd have to sort of probably get some thumbs up to do that. As a CNCF project, are we allowed to host sort of an alternate DIY nightly set of images?
So do you, so I'm hearing at least some positive sentiment of a nightly, weekly value, but I guess I haven't really heard maybe a much smaller, in some sense of my word, step of one release that's in 2 months, or 1 month in the middle, even if it was manual, if that would be valuable or not. I would love a chat, thumbs up, thumbs down, or any comment to that one way or another, like, no, I don't care, or yes, that would be useful. But yeah. Because I think that the nightly, weekly, fully automated thing is, in my sense, it's actually probably more work, at least, than taking the one-off effort in the middle of the month to do a mid release, right, with our normal way of doing it.
Yep, I would love to go to. I highlight that as an emphasis to say, if we did an alpha halfway through the cycle, we'd actually be doing that like this week or next week. So just to clarify, it would be basically the question is, if we cut a release from main now, would you take advantage of that? So we don't have to definitively
don't-
decide that now, but it sounds like maybe the initial signal is that folks wouldn't take advantage of that. So we'll continue to look into that. I think maybe on Slack we can post a more
Yep, sure. I can post
general.
chat
all hands,
threads, yeah, on it, yeah.
All right, cool. Well, that was a really interesting conversation. Managed to give ourselves potentially more work. Thanks, Mike. Okay, I think we are, does anybody, before we go to milestone review, anyone have any ad hoc topics that didn't get added to the doc that we can discuss now? Okay, cool. Milestone review it is. So we're basically about halfway through the milestone. I think it might be appropriate to do the thing where we look through the currently sort of labeled issues and look for things that we can now sort of positively kick to the next milestone. If we now know we've got 3 or 4 dev weeks of integration work left. Is that not sufficient for any of these issues? Let's see, I'll try to make this bigger. And I'm not going to read through any of these, so I'll try to watch if folks want to raise hands and call anything out. I know this one is rather important, but also probably a lot of work. But I will say, I think we would probably want Cecile here to comment if we definitely want to kick this one. I know Matt is working on this actively. This. Cecile is working on that actually, so I'll keep that in the tracking issue, I think. I know John's been doing work on here, so we'll keep that in there. Trying to watch the raise hands while I look this well. I know Nawaz is almost done with this. Matt B, do we have a lead on this one?
I mean, I've fleshed out the failing test and I found 2 unrelated bugs, but I haven't figured out what's going on. So it's gonna.
Right. Yeah. This is one that produced a draft PR this week. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. The draft PR is out there, but it's not got the fix. It's got some fixes in it, but not the fix. So yeah,
Okay,
I'm still
cool.
working on that. But I mean, I gotta finish it now because the cloud provider is waiting for us. So this will definitely.
Okay, cool.
emerge.
Sounds like we should keep it in this.
Yes.
In this milestone. Nawaz, is Nawaz here?
I'm here.
Hey Nawaz, could you comment on the active nature of this issue?
This was more of a placeholder to see what was happening, why the dependent bot was not updating hack tools go mod or something. But I look into it. I haven't gotten a chance to see if the code gen was actually working onto this.
Okay, cool. So as a result of that brief, I mean, hopefully time box to just a few minutes, feel free to kick it to the next milestone if it seems like it's not something that's going to be prioritized in the next few weeks.
For sure.
Cool.
Thank you.
How about this one, Matt?
Yeah,
Oh,
I was
you're
just
raising
gonna
your hand.
say, it's kind of, I put it there kind of optimistically because I realize that it's gonna take a lot. It's not gonna take a lot of work. It takes a lot of massaging in terms of like, we need to establish a quota for that subscription for these new, and that's gonna be the sticky widget. So I think there's a good chance this won't actually be completed, which is fine by the next release, but I wanted to put it on here so I at least start on it, or so one of us starts on it, because It may take a
Okay,
little while.
cool. And we've got a few release cycles here before this becomes.
We do, but that date is going to be here before you know it. And we'll, anyway, this is what happened last year, and I couldn't come up with a solution by August, and so they gave us another year.
Okay, cool. We'll just do that again.
Yeah, right. Maybe.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to go ahead. I don't see anyone raising hands. I'm going to go ahead and go to issues and do the next sort of phase of this. And then we could probably just take our time back. Let's see. We don't have too far down to go before we have positive milestone labels here. So let's just look at these 10 or so PRs. Willie, you actually submitted this. Looks like should we label this for the next few weeks?
Yeah, it should be a pretty easy fix if someone picks it up.
Okay, cool. Sounds like a big deal. I mean, I guess not a big deal because we're not using that for test signal, but anytime I see shows it's passed, even if it failed, an angel loses her wings or whatever, however you want to say that. Okay. I'm gonna keep this as just a placeholder issue, Matt, so we can continue to add repros. I don't think we're gonna fix this necessarily in the next few weeks. Does that sound?
I've only seen it once, so it's not epidemic. On the other hand, I think all we have to do is add an environment variable, and then it'll go away. But yeah, we don't need to put it on the milestone.
Yeah, I've seen it a couple times over the last couple months. So it's a good placeholder, and eventually we'll fix it when it reaches the threshold of annoying. Okay, this one, John, do you think that we will have a solution in the next few weeks for this?
I really don't know if that's like a one-line fix or a lot more than that. So yeah, I don't know if I would want to guess.
Cool, that is fair. So we'll keep it unlabeled for now. Also, if we know that we're gonna pop it off the stack and VNext, I can add the VNext milestone as well. So I'm unfamiliar with this one. Is anyone familiar? Feel free to step in. This looks like something that might be either swallowed at V2 or reclassified as informational. Does anyone have any other ideas about this? I'm gonna not tag this. I very much appreciate this user submitting that issue, but I don't know how to cost it right this second. No panic. This seems more interesting. So, Matt, your comment suggests that the execution flow that you think caused this is actually nominal, which is a fancy word for saying normal. But maybe we just need a single little piece of code help so that it doesn't actually throw a panic.
Maybe, or maybe there's something that went wrong earlier that led us to not having any owners. So maybe the actual bug is somewhere higher up. I just kind of looked at what he was saying and.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it should be fixed because it's a panic.
I'm gonna maybe just assign this to Jonathan and yourself as a paternalistic thing, and maybe the first step is to this is during a delete, right? Yeah. Azure machine pool machine. Okay, so that's my thoughts. I'm not gonna milestone tag it as yet. I don't want to say that this should replace other things that folks are working on. Okay, boy, I feel like I've seen this.
Cecile fixed some instances of this, and then we saw it again. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I'm gonna give this to myself, which means I might look at it in March, or I might look at it tomorrow, depending on how life happens. Okay. Matt, you want to speak to this? This looks like a kind of placeholder.
It's just kind of, it's a nice to have. Stefan Buringer was looking at our code and realized we were basically doing things kind of in an outdated way. So there's some cleanup that could happen. And I think Willie hopped on this. I don't know if we need to add it to a milestone though.
Yeah, I'm prioritizing some of the other tasks, but so probably not this milestone, but
This looks like a good V next to me. Like it'd be nice to see this one bubble up at the beginning of the next milestone planning. So I'm gonna say next. And again, I'm gonna add this, Willie, to this milestone. Feel free to comment in a couple weeks that it's not happening, but just so we can be reminded, because it does sound like something that would really annoy
yeah,
developers
sure.
using Tilt. And I will remind myself what this is, even though I opened it. That's how my brain works or doesn't work. Right. Okay. I will add this to V next. That's fair. And I am assuming that everything below these have already been looked at. That might not be an entirely correct assumption, but I think it's fair for today. I would propose we give folks 23 minutes back of their time. Any final comments, or am I bailing too early? All right. Have a nice weekend, everyone. See you on the internets.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jack.